welcome to High Energy Health. I am your host, Dawson Church, and each week on this show, I just love sharing my passions: health, healing, research, science, wellness, and happiness. Because happiness really is what it's all about. And research is now showing that as we change our mood, as we use tools like meditation and contemplation and positivity and energy therapies to change our mood, all kinds of interesting things are happening in our bodies. I talked a few times about the research showing that many genes are changing their configuration. They're turning on, they're turning off based on our inner states. And in my new book, Mind to Matter, I give you 30 practices that'll reliably, science shows, shift your gene expression in a positive direction. Some of them are really simple, like grounding, earthing, just time in nature, walking barefoot on the earth. That will do wonders for various parts of your body. And the electrons flood up through the earth, flood up through the soles of your feet into your body, and they neutralize free radicals. So there are all kinds of simple exercises like that that I list in my book, Mind to Matter. There are also really elaborate ones like acupressure and acupuncture. Some kinds of meditation take substantial investment of time and energy, but it's so worth doing these things because they do affect your health and happiness over the long term. So for more on those 30 practices, go to my website, mind2matter.com, mind2matter.com. I also want to just really thank the people who've been buying the book and sharing the book. I know I was on a podcast this week when the host told me he's reading the book for the third time because there's so much really amazing, dense information in the book. And I get that from a lot of people. A woman walked up to me at a workshop recently and said, when I read your meditation, it was so easy, I thought I could just do meditation suddenly, even though I'd failed in the past, and I made a pledge to doing it for 90 days. So I asked her, well, what day are you on now, the 90 days? She said, day 114, because it feels so good, I don't want to stop. So I encourage you to use those 30 practices. They really can affect your health and well-being. They're all at my website, mind2matter.com. And also a really big thank you to those of you who've left me reviews. There are now over 500 five-star reviews on Amazon for the book. And I really appreciate those of you who've listened to the audio or read the Kindle and then gone out and left me a review. Also, the publisher has the book on sale on Kindle today and tomorrow only for $1.99. So if you'd like to pick up a Kindle edition, even if you already have a hard copy or the Audible version, go to Amazon.com and you can get that till September 28th. Hay House has the book on sale. So share the book, share the information, inspire other people to live well and be happy. And thank you all for being part of this wonderful community that is doing so much to make that possible. My guest today is Dr. Raymond Moody. And though I've never met him in person, I have followed his work for decades because he really put the whole idea of near-death experiences on the map. He's a world-renowned scholar, lecturer, and researcher. His book, Life After Life, actually coined the term near-death experiences. And he has a new book coming out called Making Sense of Nonsense. It has appeared on hundreds of local and nationally dedicated programs to share his findings and to inspire people to look more deeply at these phenomena. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dawson. It's really nice to be with you.
You know, when I was writing Mind to Matter, I found that I could not write about near-death experiences. There was no way around it because they're now so well documented. So initially, to me, they seemed like in the 1980s, so far out, so far beyond the scope of current understanding. But then, of course, your book put them in everyone's vocabulary. And so just share how you first came to this understanding, probably as a very much a skeptic, as I first did.
Well, yeah, I was, my dad, fortunately for me, was kind of anti-religious. He had been in World War II, and he was a military medic in the World War II Pacific Theater. And I sort of realized retrospectively that probably soured him on religion. So fortunately for me, I grew up immune to it and became an avid astronomer, as I am today. I mean, I still love astronomy. And so when I was a kid, my main interests really were astronomy and on the one hand, and on the other hand, Dr. Seuss and Lewis Carroll. I always read nonsense poetry from the time I was a kid. And so I went to the University of Virginia at age 18, intent on becoming an astronomer, and took a course on philosophy my first semester at UVA. And in reading Plato's Republic was where I found out about these things at age 18, because everybody knows about the Republic, but very few people know that what it's about is near-death experiences. That's the culminating scene in the Republic about this near-death experience. And the idea of an afterlife was to me just, I thought it was a joke, really. I thought it was a cartoon theme. And so I was impressed because Plato, I'm 75 now, I was 18 then. Plato is still my hero. I mean, this is really a big thing. I read Plato all the time. So the fact that Plato took this notion of an afterlife seriously impressed me. And I remember asking my professor, Professor Hammond, about this, and he said these early Greek philosophers studied cases of people who were apparently dead and revived who had these experiences. And it never occurred to me that it was still a phenomenon in the world, but in 1965, I met Dr. George Ritchie, who at that time was a professor of psychiatry at UVA, who had had such an experience himself. And that was the first one I ever heard. And then went on, got my PhD in philosophy. I was a philosophy professor for several years, heard these stories from my colleagues and from my students, and then went to medical school in 1972. And so throughout this career, I've been fortunate to interview thousands and thousands of people with these near-death experiences. So that's how I got interested in this.
Yeah, and then of course, having somebody who is credible, who describes the experience is powerful, because it is their experience, and so it's nothing you can persuade them out of. And then there is that initial evidence from other people who've had these experiences, the fact they've been known since antiquity, but now we've been able to study them more and more and more. And then that's also led to the emergence of this literature on out-of-body experiences that are to do with near death. So ordinary people, I've been astounded in my workshops sometimes. People, they're meditating and suddenly they describe themselves as being looking down on the room and on their body from a distance. So we don't even have to have a near-death experience to have an out-of-body experience.
Exactly, yeah, that's part of the near-death experiences. People say that when their heart stops beating, they leave their body and they look down, they see their body. But as you indicate there, these near-death experiences are also brought about by other things than a close call with death. It can be, as you mentioned, meditation, or musicians playing great music on stage will sometimes say they found themselves out of their body, or astronomers at their telescopes will tell us sometimes as they're gazing through their telescopes, they get out of their body and see themselves. Yeah, this is part and parcel of being a human.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of EEG research lately, and it's striking that when people are in that flow state, so that astronomer might be looking at the heavens and be in awe and be getting to this flow state, and that can then trigger this totally different perspective, where the parietal lobe shuts down, the part of our brain that locates us in time and space goes dark, our sense of self held in the mid-prefrontal cortex just shuts down, and suddenly we're one with something greater. It's just interesting how athletes can describe this, scientists can describe this, musicians, people in flow states describe this, and it's now really being recognized, as you say, as part of human experience.
It is, and there are many really fascinating medical studies now of near-death experiences. So this is definitely into the medical community now in a very big way.
Now, just give us a striking example of one of those NDEs. I know I used one in my book, Mind to Matter, of a case history of a woman who was blind since birth, and yet during her NDE, and also not a very spiritual person at all, during her NDE, she described details of the room and the surgery, which she could never possibly have seen. Give us a couple of examples of those kinds of really convincing stories.
Well, yes. I mean, that happens rather often where people say that they see things while they're out of their bodies that, according to our standards, we couldn't have known. And I tell you the truth, Dawson, one of my specialties in philosophy were logic and philosophy of language and ancient Greek philosophy. And so to me, I realize as a professor of logic, it's very difficult to make inferences with the logical system that we've inherited from Aristotle about these things that don't really fit into that scheme. And so I think we're dealing here with something that you can't really use logic to come to a conclusion about it. I think David Hume, who's one of my favorite philosophers, he lived from 1711 to 1776. He was a friend of Ben Franklin's, for example, to date him for you. And he made the wonderful observation that, as he said, by the mere light of reason, it seems difficult to prove the immortality of the soul. Some new species of logic is required for that purpose, and some new faculties of the mind that they may enable us to comprehend that logic. And he was his point was ironical. He was saying, therefore, it can't be, or it's impossible. But he was right in his criterion, and I think he got to the gist of the issue, which is the mind we have and the logic we have is just not equipped to think about these things. And that should not be a sign of despair, but rather to say, well, let's get started and expand our minds and increase our repertoire of logical and rational principles. And then I think that this sort of big problem of existence really does have a rationally computable answer in the long run.
Yeah, when I was looking up those stories about NDEs, I also read several of the blogs and websites of skeptics who claim, for example, that they're just artifacts of brain function shifts, say during surgery or during healing crises, and that they just write them off as due to artifacts of brain function. But nothing about my understanding of the brain suggests that, for example, somebody who's brain dead could be having an experience like that.
And then another way of looking at it too is that maybe this is going to sound almost psychotic, but it's nonetheless the fact. If you look at the history of philosophy, there is another way of looking at our experience rather than to saying that the brain is that the consciousness is generated by the brain. One way of looking at it is that consciousness is what creates the brain. And that's what I've come to think in my own life. It doesn't seem to interfere with my getting around in the world, but once you think about it, you do realize that it's I realized when I was about 8 years old, 7 or 8, that I can be completely certain that I'm conscious now, aware of that. But the only reason I think that there's an external physical world is because of recurrent patterns in my consciousness. And that is a major difficulty. It was George Berkeley, the great 18th century British philosopher, in his book, Principles of Human Knowledge, makes a very ingenious case for this, that you know, why dash in to assume that there is an external physical world?
So what is that new way of seeing and new way of perceiving that you've come to, and that I think increasingly is becoming acceptable, if not the norm in society?
Well, I think it has to do with some of the greatest people in history. And I already told you, one of my heroes is Plato, and I'm a great lover of Aristotle too. And those two people have set up the way that you and I are thinking right now as we're conducting this discussion, and the way that the people who are viewing us are thinking is generated by those two people. And the person who ended up deciding what is logical was Aristotle. And when he did it, he predicated logic on literal meaning. Okay. And so it works very well when sentences are literal in meaning. But the trouble is there are many other sentences that may look like they're literal sentences, but when you analyze them, you see they're not literal at all. Like when I say, for example, there is life after death, or there is a world beyond death. Those are not literal assertions. And so Plato was trying to figure out how do we think about things that don't make sense. And so Aristotle, who was kind of fearful of anything that smacked of irrationality, he dropped that pursuit. But what I've done, and I did this in my doctoral dissertation in 1969, and it's continued to work out. It's attracted a lot of attention from nice people in the government and everywhere else about there are ways to think logically about things that don't make sense. And it's kind of, there's a blockade in our mind. We think of nonsense as kind of a wall, right? That there's nothing on the other side of that wall. It's the blank wall with just chaos and non-existence on the other side. But as soon as you start thinking about it, you see that nonsense has its own logic too. For example, who would ever conceive that there's different types of nonsense, right? If it's just a blank wall, then it's just something unformed. But listen to this. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. That's nonsense, which you would agree. But now listen to this. Holiness breathes the vestigial lipstick of spontaneity. You can see that that's nonsense too, but it's different from the first type, right? Now listen to this third one. That cannibal you men just ate was the last one in this county. That's nonsense too. But there's dozens of different types of nonsense. But we can't think that way because we have this pall dropped in front of us that says the only things that make sense are literal. So now, but already just by seeing those three things, if I gave you another sentence, you would be able to tell me which type it is. For example, if I said, when you do this experiment, if you smell an odorless gas, it's carbon monoxide. Now, what would that be? That would be an example of the third type, right? And so we absolutely can think about things that don't make any sense. And that's very important. And that's what we have to do to learn how to think logically about life after death and near-death experiences. Once you do that, for years and years, I've been conducting seminars where I take people through these exercises that they can learn to think logically about things that are unintelligible. And I conducted those seminars knowing full well that eventually somebody who had that seminar would happen to have a near-death experience. And I knew that when that happened, it would open a whole new way of them to talk about this for reasons I won't go into right now. And it happened on October 15th, 2015. I heard from a distinguished scientist and artist who had been to one of my nonsense seminars several years before. And shortly before I talked to him in October of 2015, he had developed a terrible flu and was in the hospital 60 days, developed gangrene in his leg, and horrible things, 3 cardiac arrests during his hospitalizations, during which he had near-death experiences. And so what he said to me was, he said, when he was in this state on the other side, he said his mind went back to the nonsense seminar. And he said, I realized that what you were saying is true, that you can't understand how that world is connected to this world unless, he said, you take the unintelligibility axis into account. So what I am confident in saying now is we absolutely do now have a way of preparing the mind in advance such that when it later on has a near-death experience, the mind will be able to compute it and put it into a logical framework much more easily.
I think meditation helps us do that, because when you meditate, you're enacting that same cycle of losing the self, letting go of the self, and during deep meditation, you have that merger and that very different brain function I mentioned earlier, and the part of the self that constructs our sense of self in the prefrontal cortex, also in the posterior cingulate cortex, those parts go dark, and the person literally has no sense of either time and place, and then they're able to move into that kind of awareness, and many of them do then report leaving their bodies when they're in that state. We're going to go to a break right now, but I want to pick up on this later on. I also have some really questions which I don't know the answers to. I'm going to ask you some not leading questions, because I'm so puzzled about some aspects of this myself, so I'd love to get your take on it. So we'll be right back after a break. You're listening to High Energy Health. For more about Dr. Moody's work, go to his website, theuniversityofheaven.com, theuniversityofheaven.com, and please stay tuned. We'll be right back after a break.
Dawson Church's award-winning book, Mind to Matter, has been hailed as one of the best science and health books of the decade. Over 400 studies show that your brain has the ability to turn thoughts to things, and that when you use this superpower deliberately, you can create an extraordinary life. Mind to Matter is the science and practice of how our brains create reality, and Dawson is so committed to helping people transform that he's giving copies of the book away free at mindtomatter.com. Claim your free copy at mindtomatter.com now. Imagine your love life, your health, your money, your career, your spiritual path. If you had the ability to turn your dreams into reality, the people who have discovered how to do this are master manifestors. Now you can learn their secrets at mastermanifestor.com. They'll give you a 21-day crash course in intuition, synchronicity, and manifestation. In just 7 minutes each day, the experts at mastermanifestor.com will train your brain to be like theirs. mastermanifestor.com. There's a completely natural method to help boost your immune system, maybe even up to 113% in a week. If you're interested in saving money without supplements and other expensive remedies, then explore the 7-Day Immunity Booster Program. It includes 7 powerful audio programs. 2 clinical trials even show that these methods can help increase your body's immunity naturally. So visit StressDump.com and find out how you can boost your immune system. That's StressDump.com. StressDump.com. Imagine having a certified wellness professional at your service 24/7. Whenever you're stressed, anxious, angry, sleepless, or depressed, you get help the moment you need it. You can talk to a compassionate practitioner anytime you want at mystresssolution.com. In the Stress Solution app, trained experts are standing by when you need them most. Experience a free introductory session at mystresssolution.com. You never have to face your problems alone. Get instant help at mystresssolution.com. Helping other people heal is deeply satisfying. Watching a child's pain disappear before your eyes, a loved one calming down after a panic attack, or a veteran recovering from PTSD is a wonderful feeling. Imagine yourself with the skills and confidence to help people every single day and a rewarding career in energy healing. Taught by expert faculty, you'll become skilled in techniques validated in over 1,000 scientific studies. So get certified as an energy psychology professional today at www.newhealer.com. Your first course is free at www.newhealer.com.
Hello and welcome back to High Energy Health. My name is Dawson Church, your high energy host. Just loving you, appreciating you. So glad you're here and paying attention to your own well-being enough to join me each week for the show and learn about the leading edge of wellness. I have been so delighted over the last while at the amazing response to my new book, Mind to Matter. It's sold almost 100,000 copies in the first year. People are forming book clubs around it. People are doing masterminds around it. People are reviewing it on Amazon and giving it 5-star reviews. And it's just been amazing to see how much activity there is around the book. And also, if you are listening live, please do go to Amazon and pick up a copy of the Kindle edition, because Hay House, the publisher, has it on sale for $1.99, but only for the next 2 days. So please do go ahead and support the book that way. Mind to Matter. Also go to the book's website, mindtomatter.com, for 30 practices that can really put you in touch with these higher levels of awareness and also the health benefits that they bring. All of that is at mindtomatter.com, mindtomatter.com. And then for more on Dr. Moody's work, go to his website, theuniversityofheaven.com. And don't forget the word the at the beginning, the University of Heaven, for more on his work, as well as to find out more about his upcoming book called Making Sense of Nonsense, which we've been talking about in the previous segment. I want to just have you do two things before we go too much further. One of those is just to kind of put a wrap on the story of that patient who had 3 cardiac arrests and NDEs. What was the content of those NDEs?
Well, it was really interesting. Number one, it was years before when he and I had met, he related a very terrible personal tragedy to me. It's just one of those gosh awful things that you can't even talk about without crying. I mean, one of those horrible things. And so he suddenly developed H1N1 flu back in the fall, I guess it was, of 2015. Almost died. And so the gist of our conversation had more to do with the conversations he had with God about this particular loss. And in the context of this discussion, he suddenly changed tone, and he said, when he was over there, he said, I realized that what you were saying is true, that you can't understand how that world is connected to this world unless, as he put it, as a physicist would, unless you take the unintelligibility axis into account. But because of his, he was so weak during his I talked with him about the emotional and family things. And so that was the gist of our conversation. But it makes sense in terms of a larger context because, you know, Dawson, people, one of the really, the inherent cognitive defects that we all have, which prevents us from thinking rationally, not just about life after death, but about a number of other big mysteries, is that when it gets to something unintelligible, our mind shuts off. And that's a sticking point. And this has always been in science. In science, nonsense is what I would call a placeholder. It's something we hold on to in anticipation that eventually it will all straighten out and we will make it into an intelligible form. And that's always the crucial thing in science. Right now, for example, the way it manifests is that the 2 greatest explanatory systems ever devised in physics are Einstein's general theory of relativity and the quantum theory. But the trouble is that when you combine the sets of equations of those 2 theories, the combined equation makes no sense. As they often say, it's unintelligible nonsense. But we act on the anticipation that eventually, as we learn more, this will become sensical, right? And this always happens. Go back right now in your mind to 1915 and become a very well-educated person of that era. And now listen to these following 3 sentences. Sentence number 1. All 4 of Ethel's grandparents perished and were lost in a shipwreck long before her mother and father were born. Makes no sense in 1915, right? Now listen to this sentence. 2 women got married to each other at City Hall yesterday. It's unintelligible. It's nonsensical. Or listen to this one. I watched a movie on my phone this morning, unintelligible in 1915. Carry it forward, and all of those things make sense. With the shipwreck, we send a probe down and retrieve the DNA. Then we do the genetic engineering and the cloning. And that sentence, it hasn't happened yet, but it could. And similarly with others, there's changes. And so we shouldn't be discouraged by the fact that our most important questions of existence, including the question of life after death, really don't make any literal sense. And so that's the big problem that I can assert to you as a logician and former philosophy professor and medical doctor, that's the sticking point. But now we have overcome that, and we can actually bring the rational point process to the biggest question of existence, life after death, I think in an entirely new way.
Yeah, and people argue about things like the existence of God and various metaphysical concepts. And I love this of the old Hermetic saying that to the person that has had the experience, no explanation is necessary.
That's right.
The person who has not had the experience, no explanation is possible. And
That's
so
right.
when you have these meditative experiences, when you have these altered states, we have these anomalous experiences, and they're not anomalous. I mean, 2/3 of people have them, according to various studies. And so when you have these experiences, there isn't an easy place to put them in our way of thinking about the world. And I see how you're really helping us find a place to put them,
Yes.
and then integrate them as well into our current reality.
Absolutely. It's entirely possible to do that. I mean, by a series of, you have to think about it, but you can go through a process where you can suddenly become able to think about things that are unintelligible using regular logic. I mean, this sounds so vague and abstract, and I'm hoping the listeners are not kind of rolling their eyes up. But, hey, I know what, I mean, this has never occurred to me, but how about we do this, that I could take you through that procedure that I'm talking about, which there's no way I could condense it in just a few minutes, but I could take you through that procedure, and I could say that I could help you reformat your mind in a way that enables you to think about things that are unintelligible in a whole new way. And then we could subsequently report back to the viewers on what you think about it.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I know also from reading a lot of MRI studies that once people have these kinds of experiences, they literally reshape the brain, the way the brain works. Not only is the mind different, the brain changes too.
Yes, nonsense has always been used in various spiritual contexts to induce transcendent states of consciousness. In the Christian tradition, for example, it's glossolalia, or speaking in unknown tongues, which is a nonsense syllables drawn from the speaker's own language, put together in a format without grammar, and it brings about an ecstatic state. Similarly, in a different way though, koans are nonsense. What is the sound of one hand clapping, which is an interrogative, but it's nonsensical interrogative. But when you
don't think about that, we'll take a break. We'll take a break for a moment over here, and when we come back, we'll tell you what the sound is of one hand clapping. Just kidding. My name is Dawson Church. You're listening to High Energy Health. For more on today's fascinating guest, go to his website, theuniversityofheaven.com. We'll be right back after a break.
Dawson Church's award-winning book, Mind to Matter, has been hailed as one of the best science and health books of the decade. Over 400 studies show that your brain has the ability to turn thoughts to things, and that when you use the superpower deliberately, you can create an extraordinary life. Mind to Matter is the science and practice of how our brains create reality, and Dawson is so committed to helping people transform that he's giving copies of the book away free at mindtomatter.com. Claim your free copy at mindtomatter.com now. Imagine your love life, your health, your money, your career, your spiritual path. If you had the ability to turn your dreams into reality, the people who have discovered how to do this are master manifestors. Now you can learn their secrets at mastermanifestor.com. They'll give you a 21-day crash course in intuition, synchronicity, and manifestation. In just 7 minutes each day, The experts at mastermanifester.com will train your brain to be like theirs. mastermanifester.com. There's a completely natural method to help boost your immune system, maybe even up to 113% in a week. If you're interested in saving money without supplements and other expensive remedies, then explore the 7-Day Immunity Booster Program. It includes 7 powerful audio programs. 2 clinical trials even show that these methods can help increase your body's immunity naturally. So visit StressDump.com and find out how you can boost your immune system. That's StressDump.com. StressDump.com. Imagine having a certified wellness professional at your service 24/7. Whenever you're stressed, anxious, angry, sleepless, or depressed, you get help the moment you need it. You can talk to a compassionate practitioner anytime you want at MyStressSolution.com. In the Stress Solution app, trained experts are standing by when you need them most. Experience a free introductory session at MyStressSolution.com. You never have to face your problems alone. Get instant help at MyStressSolution.com. Helping other people heal is deeply satisfying. Watching a child's pain disappear before your eyes, a loved one calming down after a panic attack, or a veteran recovering from PTSD is a wonderful feeling. Imagine yourself with the skills and confidence to help people every single day and a rewarding career in energy healing. Taught by expert faculty, you'll become skilled in techniques validated in over 1,000 scientific studies. So get certified as an energy psychology professional today at www.newhealer.com. Your first course is free at www.newhealer.com.
Welcome back to High Energy Health. My name is Dawson Church, and as you can tell, I have a lot of fun on this show each week, and I hope you do too. Just wonderful to celebrate all the beautiful tools we have as we shift our consciousness, we shift our well-being, and the results of the studies we're writing about now show that as you generate these elevated emotional states, as you're happy, as you're positive, as you're compassionate, as you're kind, as you're loving, enormous shifts happen in your body. In a study published in the journal Science about 3 weeks ago, the researchers found that optimists live about 10 years longer than pessimists. I mean, that's a huge change in lifespan and health span just based on consciousness. So use your consciousness to change your mind, to change your body, to change your brain. It's powerful what the results can be. So please do join me on the show every week. Also, for more about the future guests and schedule, go to my website, mindtomatter.com. Also, if you'd like to grab a copy of my new book, Mind to Matter, you can do that at that website, mindtomatter.com. And also the publisher Hay House has the book on special on Kindle for $1.99 for the next couple of days. So please do share the word. And again, lots of gratitude to the more than 500 people who've given the book a 5-star review on Amazon. My guest today is Dr. Raymond Moody, and his website you want to go to is theuniversityofheaven.com. That's theuniversityofheaven.com. Dr. Moody, one personal question for me has to do with what I think of as the benevolent universe. I have several meditations called the benevolent universe, and when I meditate, I feel almost like it's a mini lifetime in that I was consciousness out there before birth. I expect to be consciousness again after death, physical death of the physical body. But during meditation, you go through a similar cycle, and you're literally leaving your sense of being a local mind and merging with this wonderful non-local space. And what I experienced there is so much love. I just cry sometimes. I'm ending my meditation after an hour, and I'm almost bewildered. I'm befuddled. I don't know what to do with all the love I'm feeling. And so many people meditating in groups or with me often experience this profound love. And yet, I suspect that maybe everyone doesn't have a totally positive experience. Do you think there are people who are maybe having a scary or negative or unsettling experience out there?
Yes, there are negative near-death experiences, and there's a lot of difficulties in studying them, just like there's a lot of difficulties in studying positive ones as well. But one of the difficulties in studying negative ones is that there are fewer of them, and that I might imagine, I don't know, but you can easily conjecture that people who had a negative one might be less willing to talk, or less forthcoming. And also the negative ones are far more variegated and different, whereas the positive ones seem more homogeneous. But I don't know, Dawson. I guess I have a different theory of the negativity in life. And I like your perspective, and mine is a little different. I was when I was in graduate school in philosophy at University of Virginia in 1967, I went to a Broadway musical comedy. I don't even remember which one it was, but I was sitting on the front row with my wife, and at the end of the play, and I should say that this musical comedy had a really great comic villain in it, and the black high top hat and the black cape, right? And so when the curtain call came, the hero and heroine came out of the audience, yeah, and then the supporting actors and actresses came out, yeah. But then when the villain came out, silence, right? And then it seemed like an eternity, and I'm sure just a couple of seconds or whatever. But then all of a sudden, once you heard a whole bunch of people in the audience at once almost go, and then they sort of came back to reality. And that's how it is in life. I look back on some of the negative people I've known in my life and some of the negative, and now I look back from a different perspective and I say, oh, thank you. That was part of my education. You see what I mean? It's like I've sort of come to thinking that I don't know I would want to live a Pollyanna life with all, I mean, it's partly the conflict and the struggles that make this interesting and experience. And I often ask people, if you were diagnosed with a terrible infection that it required for you to be isolated all by yourself on a desert island for, say, 10 years, all right? And they could send you out there on a cargo plane, and there was room in the hull of the plane for, say, all the food and water and medicine you would need for 10 years. But there was also extra space where they could carry on a DVD player and, let's say, 5,000 DVDs. Now, what I would ask people, I've asked thousands of people over the years, it's like, would you choose all comedies? And I've only had 3 people in all those years to say, yeah, I would. Everybody else say, yeah, I'd choose some comedies, I'd choose some tragedies and all. And I asked, well, when you were isolated on that desert island, when you were watching the tragedy, would you be crying? Yeah, well, sure I would. That's what a tragedy is. So I think if you talk about reincarnation, which incidentally was the only form of reincarnation that David Hume, the great skeptic, said he thinks that's the only form of the afterlife that a rational person could entertain, then it would make sense that you would want some negative lives and some positive lives too. I mean, just because you try to imagine you're in a higher state of framework of existence, and you might want to come in here to experience some of those unpleasant things.
That makes sense. Now, as far as reincarnation goes, one of the things I can't quite figure out is how, when you do merge with that state, and this is a common experience in all religions, all spiritual paths, is unity. It's one of the 5 characteristics of these transcendent states. And so you feel a sense of unity with all, a sense of being a distinct being, human being or any kind of being. What I'm really curious about is how you then can, in a meaningful sense, after you've done that after death, reincarnate as the same being. So we'll think about that over the break again, because it'll take a lot longer than a minute to answer that. We'll take a break for a few moments here. Please stay tuned. You're listening to High Energy Health. My name is Dawson Church, speaking with Dr. Raymond Moody. His website is theuniversityofheaven.com. Don't forget the THE in the beginning, theuniversityofheaven.com. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back after a break.
Dawson Church's award-winning book, Mind to Matter, has been hailed as one of the best science and health books of the decade. Over 400 studies show that your brain has the ability to turn thoughts to things, and that when you use this superpower deliberately, you can create an extraordinary life. Mind to Matter is the science and practice of how our brains create reality, and Dawson is so committed to helping people transform that he's giving copies of the book away free at mindtomatter.com. Claim your free copy at mindtomatter.com now. Imagine your love life, your health, your money, your career, your spiritual path. If you had the ability to turn your dreams into reality, the people who have discovered how to do this are master manifestors. Now you can learn their secrets at mastermanifestor.com. They'll give you a 21-day crash course in intuition, synchronicity, and manifestation. In just 7 minutes each day, the experts at mastermanifestor.com will train your brain to be like theirs. mastermanifestor.com. There's a completely natural method to help boost your immune system, maybe even up to 113% in a week. If you're interested in saving money without supplements and other expensive remedies, then explore the 7-Day Immunity Booster Program. It includes 7 powerful audio programs. 2 clinical trials even show that these methods can help increase your body's immunity naturally. So visit StressDump.com and find out how you can boost your immune system. That's StressDump.com. StressDump.com. Imagine having a certified wellness professional at your service 24/7. Whenever you're stressed, anxious, angry, sleepless, or depressed, you get help the moment you need it. You can talk to a compassionate practitioner anytime you want at mystresssolution.com. In the Stress Solution app, trained experts are standing by when you need them most. Experience a free introductory session at mystresssolution.com. You never have to face your problems alone. Get instant help at mystresssolution.com. Helping other people heal is deeply satisfying. Watching a child's pain disappear before your eyes, a loved one calming down after a panic attack, or a veteran recovering from PTSD is a wonderful feeling. Imagine yourself with the skills and confidence to help people every single day and a rewarding career in energy healing. Taught by expert faculty, you'll become skilled in techniques validated in over 1,000 scientific studies. So get certified as an energy psychology professional today at www.newhealer.com. Your first course is free at www.newhealer.com.
Welcome back to High Energy Health. I am your host, Dawson Church, and each week on the show, I explore the leading edge of health, wellness, and happiness, with particular emphasis on things you can do in your own life that will shift your own sense of well-being. In my new book, Mind to Matter, I list about 30 of those practices. Some are as simple as grounding, some are more elaborate, like massage and acupressure, some need other people, some you can do alone, but it's so worth just playing with those 30 things that can really shift your own health and well-being. To find out more about those, my website, mindtomatter.com, mindtomatter.com. Also, you can find out more about Dr. Raymond Moody's work at his website, theuniversityofheaven.com. And again, that's theuniversityofheaven.com. So, Dr. Moody, you touched on reincarnation in the previous segment. And one of the puzzles to me about reincarnation is that when I meditate, I lose myself in this sense of bliss and union with a non-local mind. And my sense of being a self just goes away.
Yes.
And so when my body dies, I expect I'd have a similar experience, that I then have no body or brain to even anchor on feeling a sense of self, and I would then feel one with this universal consciousness. And so I can't quite figure out how reincarnation could happen. Why would this particular strange mental combination of characteristics?
I absolutely agree. And that's one of the great philosophical questions. What is the nature of personal identity? And, it's people who have near-death experiences tell me that on the other side, there is no such thing as time or space. So therefore, it can't be a story, can it? Doesn't a story like we're living now, doesn't that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, like Aristotle told us? But if there's no time or space, then I wouldn't think that the existence on the other side has a narrative structure like it does here. But then it's hard to imagine what else there might be. Some people have said that, for example, knowledge or information and love seem to be what constitutes that other state of existence. And I sort of see that. Those are the two things that have certainly meant most to me in my life, is my love for my children and my family, my wife, and so on the one hand. And then on the other hand, the knowledge I've acquired while I was here. And in a funny sort of way, both of those sort of defy the time-space continuum. And, as people often ask, well, if I've had previous lives, why don't I remember it? And Plato made a very interesting observation about that. He equated it to what we call as psychologists an event boundary. An event boundary is an experience we've all had, which is, it's like when you're in the living room and you decide you want to go inside the kitchen to get something. What happens as soon as you walk through the door into the kitchen, you forget what you came in for, right? And that's kind of how Plato said this thing we're in is set up, because it would be just too distracting for all that information about previous lives and so on to be crowding in on you when you're trying to live this one. And that's
that's what we figured out first. Yeah.
I guess the Tibetans said something similar. They said, in your spiritual quest, there will come a point where the past lives start emerging. But he says that they say that what you should do is just sort of note them and let them pass on. And I think that's the advice I've come to in my own life, just on independent grounds. But
so where else are you in your own life, just in the last couple of minutes? Where's this journey brought you to?
Well, I was just, to me, I never even imagined that there might be a life after death, but now I give up. I mean, apparently there is. There's no logical way of deciding it, but, the way that these near-death experiences have been debated since the time of Democritus and Plato is the same. Plato looked at them and took them as indicators of an afterlife, but Democritus, the atomist, said these experiences are just the residual biological activity in the body, and when somebody's apparently dead. And he said there's no such thing as a moment of death, so these experiences are just the physiological remnants of the body. And so, but the trouble with that classical debate, which we still involved in today, is that it fails to account for why people at the bedside of the dying, who are not themselves ill or injured, will nonetheless have this same experience that we call a near-death experience. They say, as grandma died, I got out of my body and I went part way toward this light toward her. I saw the apparitions of her dead friends coming into the room. The bystander was not ill or injured, so there's no question of an oxygen deprivation to the brain. And yet they have the same experience. So something very different is going on, which is threatening to many people. I mean, it's for some reason, many people are scared of the unknown. To me, it's the known that's the scary part.
What a wonderful note on which to close. Thank you so much. And the unknown I found too just holds nothing but love for us. When I go there, I'm back with that love. Thank you so much for being
Thank you, Dawson.
Amazing and fascinating human being, and being so generous with sharing your insights with people and really helping us think about our current lives as well as those other states in a very new way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawson. It was loved being with you.
And Dr. Raymond Moody's website is theuniversityofheaven.com. Please join us next week, and we'll be exploring more on the cusp here of healing, energy, spirituality, and happiness. I'd love to have you there, and I'd love to share more breakthrough practices and insights that can make a huge difference in your own level of wellness, as well as your own level of joy. Thanks again.